Hello and welcome to Global News Today, bringing you exclusive interviews with leading experts every weekday here on Al-Arabiya English. I'm Tom Burges Watson, and coming up on today's programme, negotiators continue their talks in Egypt, where they're discussing President Trump's 20-point plan for Gaza. While parties there in Sharm el-Sheikh are expressing cautious optimism that a deal can be done. We'll be hearing from Israeli, Palestinian and Egyptian guests throughout this programme. And Syria announces a comprehensive ceasefire with Kurdish forces after deadly clashes in the northern city of Aleppo. And the other story we're following for you is the price of gold, which has reached some record levels. We'll be asking what's behind this rally and how much higher could the price go? Hello and welcome to the programme. We begin in the Egyptian town of Sharm el-Sheikh, where negotiations have entered a third day. This with the goal of finalising a deal based on President Donald Trump's Gaza ceasefire plan. Well, as the talks have progressed, the number of participants has increased. The latest arrivals at this expanded meeting include Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, President Trump's son-in-law, who arrived in the coastal Egyptian city this morning. Well, also in attendance, the Qatari Prime Minister and Turkey's intelligence chief. Well, there is talk of cautious optimism surrounding these negotiations, but it remains to be seen. Will these diplomatic efforts deliver results? We're joined now by Afif Safieh, who is the former Palestinian ambassador to the UK, Russia, the Netherlands, and also the person who was the head of the PLO mission to the United States. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us, Ambassador. I just want to start by asking you, President Trump has been expressing some optimism about the diplomatic efforts underway in Sharm el-Sheikh. And I wanted to find out from you whether you share that sense of optimism.
Let me surprise you. I, for one, personally, I hope sincerely that President Trump will earn during his second mandate the Nobel Peace Prize. Not this Friday, not this year, because he hasn't deserved it yet. But let me offer him a piece of advice, a policy recommendation. We need to see him do and emulate the Eisenhower moment, meaning statesmanship and American leadership. You know, Eisenhower, after the 1956 tripartite aggression against Egypt, when Israel occupied the Sinai, with one phone call, he got Israel to withdraw out of the Sinai. And Ben-Gurion, then the prime minister, was a roaring lion. Netanyahu, compared to Ben-Gurion, is a lamb. I personally believe that the international community expects the American administration to play a very assertive, dynamic role, not only in stopping the aggression now on Gaza Strip, but ending the Israeli-Palestinian, the Israeli-Arab conflict in its entirety. And I believe, sir, that President Trump would be well advised if he was reminded of the Saudi peace initiative of 2002, which was adopted by the entire Arab system, the 22 Arab states, then was adopted by the entire Islamic states, the 57 of them. And he should know that today the Islamic states, the Arab states, no more challenge Israeli existence, but Israeli expansion of 1967. And they expect the withdrawal of Israeli occupation out of the 67 expansion and are ready to recognize Israeli existence and normalize with it. And I believe that President Trump, who is very keen on the issue of normalization, should understand that Israeli security does not come from territorial aggrandizement, but from regional acceptance. And he should know that we, the Palestinians, are the key for the regional acceptance of Israel. I believe we should be expecting more from the American administration beyond the cessation of the carnage and the slaughter of Gaza. We would expect from him a dynamic role towards peace in the Middle East.
Okay, well,
that is.
Yeah, I mean, his immediate priority is to put a stop to what is now a more than 2-year-long war in Gaza.
Yeah, but I cannot conceal my disappointment that he has called publicly on Netanyahu 5 days ago to stop bombing the Gaza Strip. And up to now, Netanyahu has been the reluctant player, continuing with his bombardment, indiscriminate bombardment in the Gaza Strip. Yet, I think the international community expects the cessation of hostilities in Gaza, the liberation of the Israeli captives and Palestinian prisoners, and the entry of the humanitarian aid. And I believe we should then go beyond that with a more ambitious plan, which is peace in the Middle East, beyond the 20 points that were presented by President Trump during his press conference with Netanyahu.
Okay, so in terms of where we are now and those 20 points that are under discussion in Egypt, it's been reported that Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, who is, of course, President Trump's son-in-law, arrived in Sharm el-Sheikh this morning. This afternoon, Ron Dermer, he is Israel's Strategic Affairs Minister, arrived. Does that look to you like signs of progress in the talks?
I would like to wait and see, but I would like to also to say that the American administration will be well advised to abandon this bad habit of nominating pro-Israelis from America as the mediators in the Middle East conflict. This was not helpful during the Clinton years, where the entire team for peacemaking was made of members of the pro-Israeli lobby in Washington. And today, Witkoff and Kushner, I don't know them personally, but they are hardly seen as people who would be inclined to be even-handed. But anyway, let's keep our hopes high and let's keep our expectations high. I believe that the world, the entire international community, expects them to have a breakthrough. I believe that on the Palestinian and Arab and Muslim sides, they have been all forthcoming. It's Israeli reluctance, it's the stubbornness of Mr. Netanyahu, who unfortunately has succeeded in torpedoing previous efforts for 2 years. He has torpedoed many an effort, and I'm hopeful that this time it might work in the first phase. But Israel has to take a commitment to start withdrawing out of the Gaza Strip. There is no need for them to remain in the Gaza Strip. They know they have the military capability of reoccupying it if they so desired, and if not impeded by the international community. So I will keep my expectations high for a breakthrough on the cessation of violence in the Gaza Strip.
Okay, well, I mean, there is a new dimension to these talks, which is different from other talks, in that President Trump managed to get the Turkish to take part. Turkey's spy master, Ibrahim Kalin, is there as well. And I'm just wondering whether you think that makes a big difference, having Turkey represented at those talks, because presumably the logic is they exert influence over Hamas.
Look, during the last 4 decades in the Middle East, we had 3 major players. It was Israel, Turkey, and Iran. Unfortunately, there was no Arab player in this region, which is of extreme importance to the world. I believe that today, with Saudi Arabia showing an appetite to play a more dynamic role in international relations and in regional relations, and I believe that if there is more coordination between Saudi Arabia and Egypt, the Arab world will be better represented on the international arena. Now, Turkey's presence is not unimportant because they have influence on Hamas, and they might play a constructive role, yes, of course. And I believe they already have signaled to Hamas that it would be wise for them to contemplate in the future to create a new Hamas movement under a different appellation, and to coordinate better with the other factions of the Palestinian national movement, and mainly with Fatah, the PA, and the PLO. I believe that the PLO can offer a safe haven, political safe haven, to Hamas, who are not going to be eliminated neither ideologically nor physically. And I believe that it would be wise for Hamas to reintegrate the PLO umbrella under a new appellation in the future. And that was the advice from Turkey, which I believe is extremely wise.
Okay, it's being reported that some deep gaps remain between the two sides in these negotiations. I mean, that's not surprising, is it, given the intensity of the conflict and the grave mistrust, I think it's fair to say, between the two sides. I mean, what do you think those deep gaps are likely to be? What do you think the key sticking points will be at this stage?
Well, there is no clear formulation for the total withdrawal of the Israelis in the coming weeks, and their presence in Gaza is totally unnecessary and unhelpful. But the most important thing is that once we get the ceasefire and we get humanitarian aid and the liberation of the captives and Palestinian prisoners, I believe we should be more ambitious in our diplomatic pursuit. I personally believe that the objectives of the 20-point program are very minimalistic. And here I would like to say that the American input is of extreme importance. And here I would expect President Trump to be more even-handed in dealing with the issue in the Middle East. You know, America is a fascinating society. It's a nation of nations, and every possible country, continent, and culture is represented within American ranks. And I personally believe that America is a dominant player in the international system, and it would be well advised to adopt non-alignment in regional conflicts in the future, and mainly in the Middle East, because aligning itself on one belligerent party in a regional conflict not only alienates and offends all the other players in the region, but it also offends part of the domestic national fabric of American society. It wasn't easy to be a Palestinian American during the last decades because of the insensitivity of the country of adoption vis-à-vis the problems of the country of origin. And there are 500,000 Palestinian Americans, and one of them today has won the Nobel Prize for Chemistry, by the way, a Palestinian American from Berkeley University. And it wasn't easy to be an Arab American, and there are 4 million of those. It wasn't easy to be a Muslim American in American society. So I believe that American non-alignment in regional conflicts is a wise course of action to be adopted and pursued. And by the way, I still remember that in 2014, 2015, when President Trump was running for the primaries of the Republican Party during his first quest for the White House, he spoke for a short period of America neutral in the Middle East. Unfortunately, and he won several primaries with that objective being approached. Then he was embraced by the Christian evangelicals and with their delirious theology, and he was embraced by some kleptomaniac pro-Israeli oligarchs, and he then changed the tune. I would advise him to go back to his initial original plan of American neutrality in regional conflicts, and this will earn him a deserved Nobel Peace Prize if ever he helps in the birth of a Palestinian state. I believe the international community today is saying the following: there is either one people too many in the Middle East, this time we the Palestinians, or there is a state which is missing and needs to be created. I believe America can make the difference by changing the attitude adopted today in Washington.
Okay, and in terms of what we might see achieved in the next couple of days, I mean, lots has been happening. Hamas has submitted a list of the prisoners it wants to see freed. Obviously, the Israelis want their hostages freed, 20 of whom are believed to be alive. Do you anticipate that to happen in one phase, or do you think there'll be a phased release of those surviving hostages?
It depends on what would be the Israeli attitude. The Israelis up to now haven't said who are the prisoners they are ready to liberate. And as you know, we have 12,000 prisoners in horrible conditions that have not seen the representatives of the Red Cross for months and months at length, because the Israelis prevent the Red Cross of having access to Palestinian prisoners. Most of them are there in administrative detention with no trial and no court hearings, etc. And they have been maltreated. I have seen pictures of prisoners when they were imprisoned, and prisoners as they are today. They are a skeleton of what they used to be because of deprivations. And Ben Gvir, the minister in charge of prisons, is all the time boasting on how he is punishing them on a daily basis by malnourishment and torture and all the rest. So much depends on how the Israelis will be reciprocating. Hamas has announced that it is ready to free the captives they hold. They might need some time for those who unfortunately have died in the meantime, probably due to Israeli indiscriminate bombardment in the Gaza Strip. But those who are alive, I believe they are ready to free them, depending on how the Israelis free Palestinian prisoners, either by installment or in one block. I hope for the speediest possible operation on both sides with reciprocity and seriousness. And here again, American pressure on the Israelis is not unwelcome.
Okay, and just lastly, I mean, in terms of what provisions the 20-point plan makes for an eventual Palestinian state, I mean, it is quite vague, the document. It doesn't spell anything out clearly, but people we've spoken to have said that the simplicity of this document is possibly its greatest asset. I'm just wondering how likely you think it is that once these 20 points are ironed out, that, you know, real efforts can be made towards the establishment of a Palestinian state. I mean, is that something you see happening in the years ahead?
Let me tell you, the feeling of diplomats around the world is that this 20-point program is very poorly written. And Kissinger had fabricated the concept of constructive ambiguity, and we all discovered that there are no constructive ambiguities. Ambiguities are usually unconstructive. And I am in favor of diplomatic clarity. First of all, I want to remind you that, unfortunately, the 20 points read by Mr. Trump in the press conference were different from the 21 points that were submitted to the Arab and Muslim leaders whom he had met a few days earlier in New York. And this document was rewritten after meetings between Netanyahu and Witkoff and Kushner. This is why I said we should abandon the bad habit of having American mediators belonging to the pro-Israeli lobby. That's not fair at all. And many today in America, even including within the Republican ranks, that unfortunately in the Israeli-American relation, it's the tail that is wagging the dog and not the dog wagging the tail. So my personal hope is that once we achieve the cessation of hostilities in Gaza and the liberation of captives and prisoners and the massive arrival of humanitarian aid, we need to redraft the remaining points and maybe another meeting between Trump and the Arab and Muslim leaders by Zoom, not necessarily physically, maybe might be necessary for the clarification of the steps further. And I personally believe, as a Palestinian, the link between Gaza and the West Bank and East Jerusalem should be maintained. It's a cornerstone of the Oslo agreements, which we have signed in the White House in 1993. It spoke of territorial integrity of the Palestinian Authority with both wings, the West Bank and Gaza, belonging to the same emerging entity. I personally believe that today the Jewish public opinion in America is extremely important and is evolving in a very constructive manner. Many, and you have seen it on TV, many in Washington and New York have demonstrated by saying not in our name. An opinion poll that I read in the Jewish media says that 40% of the American Jews believe that there is a genocide being committed in Gaza. I believe that all those factors are encouraging, promising, constructive for the future. And there is a convergence that will be occurring in the coming days and weeks between those who want to liberate Palestinian territories occupied by Israel and those who want to liberate Israel of its occupied territories, because they are familiar and aware of the moral corrosion and the moral erosion that the occupation is occasioning in Jewish Israeli society. And in America, I know for a fact that the American community is becoming increasingly embarrassed by the Israeli behavior in the Middle East. And I believe they were always in the forefront for human rights and civil rights. And for 50 years, they have been expected by Israel to defend the indefensible, the unbearable. And the last 2 years were really unbearable, including for them. I always say a message to the Jewish communities around the world that a Palestinian state is our right, we the Palestinians, but it's a moral duty, an ethical obligation for Jewish communities around the world, because they, more than anybody else, know the price, the human price that we collectively and individually had to pay so that Israel can be carved in the Middle East. And we were expelled then to the periphery of our homeland. Today, we are unreasonably reasonable. We are in favor of the two-state solution, which was the international consensus. And I believe that, unfortunately, during the previous peace process from 1993 onwards, instead of seeing and witnessing Israeli withdrawal from occupation, what we have witnessed was the expansion of occupation through the elastic growth of the illegal settlements. All this should stop. We're aware of the internal blockages within Israeli society forward. And many were saying to the Israelis and to the Americans that America gives Israel a lot of aid and some advice. Up to now, Israel takes all the aid and leaves the advice aside.
Okay.
I hope that President Trump will tell the Israelis, you can have the aid only if you also took the advice, and that he will give them wise advice.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. We're out of time. Thank you very much indeed, Afif Safieh, former Palestinian ambassador. Thank you very much indeed for your time, sir. Well, we can now speak to Fleur Hassan-Nahoum, who is an Israeli special envoy for trade and innovation. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. Always a pleasure seeing you. Before we talk about the diplomatic efforts in Egypt, I just want to ask you, I mean, yesterday was, of course, the 7th of October, and I want to ask you what you did to mark that day and what was going through your mind yesterday, Fleur.
Well, it was actually a very mixed emotion type of a day because it was also a Jewish holiday. So it was a Jewish holiday, high holiday. And so we're busy going to synagogue and doing all the traditional holiday meals. And then we came out of the holiday in sundown and went straight to all the memorial services, which of course are very sad. Our lives changed forever on the 7th of October. Our innocence ended and we came into a new era that we never expected. So there's a lot of sadness. And the worst thing is that we can't even begin to start healing as long as there are still hostages languishing, tortured and starved in the tunnels of Gaza. And so very, very difficult day for all of us.
Looking towards what's been happening in Sharm el-Sheikh today, a third day of indirect talks have been held, and the word on the street seems to be cautious optimism surrounding those talks. Do you share that cautious optimism?
We have to hold on to hope. We have to understand hope that if Hamas are now in a position where they've been pressurized by Qatar and by Turkey, who are their biggest friends and sponsors, and if President Trump is putting enough pressure on Qatar to push them, there is really a chance here of getting our hostages back and then having a permanent ceasefire. This is what we always wanted. We had a permanent ceasefire on the 6th of October. That, of course, was breached by Hamas on the 7th of October with their massacre. Nobody wants this war to continue. All our soldiers are 19, 20-year-old boys. All mothers and fathers can't sleep at night knowing that their children are there fighting for their country. And so, yes, we want this to end, and we pray that it ends. But with Hamas, you never know, because they're very cynical. They are terrorists. They lie. They say that they've accepted the deal, and then they come back with a completely different deal. So let's hope that they don't try and do one of those sleights of hand again.
When we look at the signals coming out of Sharm el-Sheikh, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner arrived this morning, the Israeli minister Ron Dermer this afternoon. I mean, do those look to you like signals that progress is being made?
Yes, absolutely, spot on, Tom, because I think that if Witkoff and Kushner show up, it's because Trump has basically said to them, you're going and you're not coming home until you close this deal. I think everybody understands how determined President Donald Trump is to ensure the freedom of these hostages and to end the war. And so that does give me a lot of hope. And the fact that today, for example, Hamas presented the list of prisoners they want released, that also gives me hope, because at least there's a negotiation going on. And so I really pray that by the Jewish anniversary, the Jewish calendar anniversary of the 7th of October, which will be next Tuesday, that maybe our hostages are home with their families.
Meanwhile, the offensive in Gaza continues. At least 8 people reported killed there in the last 24 hours. That's the last death toll I saw. It's a much lower death toll than the usual, the death tolls we've seen in recent weeks and months. But nevertheless, President Trump has urged Israel to stop the bombardment. Why isn't Israel honouring that request?
Well, Israel is honouring that request. You said yourself, the casualties are much less. You have to understand that you're in a very difficult urban terrain where terrorists are popping up underground and trying to kill soldiers, trying to kill Gazans. And this is what Israel is facing. Nobody is being killed because for walking around the streets. We are trying to respect the request of Donald Trump, but there's a horrible reality where still 10 to 15,000 terrorists are popping out of tunnels. That's just the reality.
And when you heard your Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying, I think it was yesterday, he said that Israel faces a time of fateful decisions. What do you think he meant by that?
Well, everybody understands here in Israel that there's always has to be a compromise involved. Israel will have to compromise. That means that we are probably going to be releasing 250 terrorists with blood on their hands. These are people who killed innocent Israelis. And so imagine you're one of these families where your loved one was killed, where the terrorist was put in jail for the rest of his life, and now he's getting released. And this is what we have to swallow in order to finish the war and get our hostages home.
Some of the most prominent of the prisoners that you just mentioned there, Marwan Barghouti and Ahmed Sadat, do you see them, given that they are serving, in some cases, multiple life sentences, do you see it as likely that they will be released?
I'm not sure about Marwan Barghouti because he's also a symbol of the second intifada, which killed thousands of people, Jews and Arabs alike. And as a result of the fact that Israel had the audacity to offer the two-state solution to Arafat. That's why the second intifada happened. And so because he's such a symbol of the second intifada, which was essentially the answer of Arafat and his gang to the offer of a two-state solution, to the offer of peace, finally, I'm not sure he will be released. And it's interesting that Hamas are asking for his release because he's a Fatah activist, he's a Fatah terrorist, he's not a Hamas terrorist, which is also, of course, a political move on behalf of Hamas. They want to be the heroes of the Palestinian people and they want to undermine Mahmoud Abbas. And so there's a lot of internal struggle going on here. And I'm not sure that it's in Mahmoud Abbas's interest for Marwan Barghouti to be released. So who knows what's going on behind closed doors.
What we do know is that Hamas has a chief negotiator there in Sharm el-Sheikh by the name of Khalil al-Hayya, whom Israel tried to kill in Doha last month. He says he's there to have, quote, serious and responsible negotiations. Do you believe him?
I'm not sure if I believe him, but what choice do we have? These are the people that are holding our hostages. So what choice do we have but to believe him, or at least the interlocutors that are putting pressure on him? We have no other choice. This is the situation that we're in because 251 innocent hostages were taken on the 7th of October. And that's the situation that we're in. And in Israel, we value life. We celebrate life. And unfortunately, we're dealing with a group that is a death cult, that celebrate death, that look forward to death. And so it's a very uneven conflict in that way because every life for us is so important and they have the opposite priorities.
I just want to ask you a couple of quick more questions. I mean, one of the things I read today is that Itamar Ben-Gvir had visited al-Aqsa. And I just wondered what message you think he was sending out by doing that whilst this dialogue is taking place a few thousand kilometers away.
Well, we all know that Ben-Gvir is against any type of negotiations with terrorists. He's not the only person on earth who feels that way. Many countries around the world have an ethos. We will never negotiate with terrorists, and that's what Israel wanted to always do. But unfortunately, we're in a difficult situation where we have no choice. And so Itamar Ben-Gvir is a provocative character here in Israel and likes attention. And I think that's what he was trying to do, get attention.
Okay, so you wouldn't agree with his course of action in doing that, which was, you know, it did cause unrest and upset in the Middle East, viewed as a violation of the status quo.
Well, it's not a violation of the status quo. And I just want to remind everybody that Israel here sanctifies freedom of worship for everyone except Jews on Temple Mount. We don't let Jews pray on Temple Mount to be sensitive to the Muslim community, something we get absolutely no credit for. And so the principle of what he's doing is not wrong, but I think his timing is provocative and ill-advised.
Okay, and just lastly, I mean, let's end this conversation on a more upbeat note. I saw that the shekel is up against the dollar. Clearly, the markets are a good indicator of what's happening in the world, what sentiment is on Main Street. Would you say that was a sign of overall optimism that something is going to be achieved there in Sharm el-Sheikh?
Yes, I think so. But look, it's really actually quite incredible the way that if you look at the Israeli Stock Exchange, since the beginning of the war, we're up 30%. When you look at other stock exchanges around the world, they don't come anywhere near there. And so there's a lot of good signs. And Israel has a very robust economy, and investment still continues. And we're leading in innovation. And sometimes a war is also a good testing ground for all sorts of other technologies. And so overall, the Israeli economy is robust and it will get better. And please God, and that's all we ever want in Israel. We're a productive country. We want to get on with building. We want to get on with developing. We never wanted this war. We've never wanted any war. We've never started any war. And so we hope to get our hostages home. We hope that the people of Gaza get better leaders that are not solely invested in the destruction of their neighbor and want actually a better future for those people. And maybe this war is a chance to get to the other side of it where the Gazans get better leadership.
All right, well, that's where we're going to end our discussion. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Fleur Hassan-Nahoum, thank you again.
Thank you, John.
We can get more now and speak to Ambassador Rakha Hassan, who is a member of the Egyptian Council for Foreign Affairs and former Egyptian Assistant Foreign Minister. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us from Cairo. I know you're about 500 kilometers away from where the talks are happening in Sharm el-Sheikh, but when you listen to what's being said, 3 days of indirect talks and people describing an air of cautious optimism there. I mean, what's your sort of feeling about where these talks are heading?
I think all the parties, whether the conflicting parties or the mediators or the guarantees or all the other who are interested in the peace process and to stop this criminal war, they are pushing hard to reach an agreement. Because there are a lot of difficult points to agree upon, whether from the Israeli side or from Hamas. And now I think they are some of the leakage of the information that they reached to some extent some concessions from both parties. And we are expecting that during tomorrow or maybe today evening, because the American Witkoff and the Kushner, they arrived today to Sharm el-Sheikh, and they will join the negotiations. So I think this will push forward to reach an agreement, especially upon the ceasefire, because the Palestinian side would like to have a guarantee, a real guarantee that it will be permanent ceasefire by the Israeli side. And then also the withdrawal from Gaza Strip, just to start the reconstruction and the redevelopment of the Strip. Also, some prisoners, Palestinian prisoners in Israel, some names who are convicted for lifetime. Some of them are important leaders, and they spent a lot of years in prison, so yet they asked to release them. Also, that for the next day, that's, I think there will be the second step to be discussed among all these parties.
Right. So, okay, they've got a lot to talk about, haven't they? And you mentioned there that Steve Witkoff arrived, Jared Kushner is there, the Israeli Minister Ron Dermer is on his way as well. But you'd say overall that indicates that progress is being made. You'd see that as being a positive signal, would you?
Well, I think it's difficult to imagine that after all this destruction and the horrible situation in Gaza Strip, and almost all the world, and even President Donald Trump himself, he is declaring every day since now 3 days that we are very close to reach an agreement. So this is, I think, will facilitate the situation, particularly if he exerted a kind of pressure or convincing Israel that it is time to stop this mad war and killing his children, women, civilians, without any objective to be accepted by the international community, even by the regional community. And also it is would be good for the accepting Israel in the area, and Israel up to now didn't want it to be integrated in the region, and this is not good for her future in the area.
I just want to talk about who else is there. We haven't mentioned that Qatari and Turkish officials are also taking part. How significant do you think it is that President Trump asked Turkey to take part in these discussions?
Well, I think the Turkish joined as a mediator also because there are a lot of Palestinians who are living in Turkey, particularly from Hamas and the other fighting groups in Gaza. And Turkey also was among the 8 leaders of the Arab and Islamic countries who met with President Donald Trump in New York. So this may be helping in convincing the Palestinians, particularly Hamas, to give some concessions and to accept that to deliver its arms. But they make a condition. I mean, Hamas, they will deliver their arms to a committee, Palestinian Egyptian committee, maybe by some other observers, but not to the what's called the stability board will be established by Mr. Tony Blair and Donald Trump himself.
And what do you think will happen if Hamas refuses to disarm? Would that automatically bring these talks to an end, do you think?
Well, I think, all the parties now are very exhausted and tired from this mad war. And the Palestinians who are living in this hell in Gaza Strip, this is in itself represent pressure upon the Hamas and the other Palestinian fighters. So I think, but they are seeking a reasonable and acceptable agreement, which not to be on the side of the Israeli and to give the Israel the liberty to launch again the war or to retreat as it happened before and to go back on this agreement. So they need a guarantee. So if they are offered these guarantees and they ask it to be signed on paper, not only oral or just the promises, but to be document. And that's why President Sisi declared that he invites President Donald Trump to come to Sharm el-Sheikh and to sign the agreement when the negotiators reach to this agreement.
Okay, so I mean, obviously, there are lots of things to be discussed as indicated by the 20 points. But I mean, the immediate priority is, of course, a ceasefire in Gaza. At the same time, Arab leaders are saying that an eventual Palestinian state must be created. Although the Israeli Prime Minister is saying that's not going to happen. I mean, when do you think we might get to that stage of discussion when we start talking about Palestinian statehood? Is that for another round of talks, do you think?
Well, I think that without paving the way for the completing. I didn't say establishing from zero, but already existing the land, the people, and the government in Palestine. What is needed only is the recognition. And we have now 150 nations recognize the Palestinian state. So what the Israelis cannot by themselves decide the future and the self-determination of the Palestinians. It is against the law, against the existence of Israel itself, because the United Nations issued in 1947 a resolution establishing two states. And already Israel has been established. Still, we have to recognize the other part of the resolution. This is the Palestinian state. Without reaching to this point, I think the agreement will be very partial, and it will be very weak, and they cannot solve it, and they cannot achieve the peace in the Middle East, as President Donald Trump say, because stopping the fighting in Gaza Strip itself, it wouldn't realize the peace unless there will be a Palestinian state.
As a seasoned diplomat, I just wanted to ask you, what were your first reactions when you saw the 20-point plan that President Trump has put forward? What were your reactions towards it, and did you have any concerns about it?
Well, I read it carefully. I found that we cannot say that it is a plan. It's a framework. It is a framework because every item has to be negotiated to reach an agreement. And there are many details which cannot be accepted, whether by the Arab countries or by the Palestinians. For example, to fight Mr. Tony Blair to be the ruler of the Gaza Strip. Why? We have many eligible and well-qualified Palestinians. They are not belonging to any organization, or Palestinian organization, I mean. So why we go to Tony Blair, and he's, you know, is this disputable person in the Arab countries since the Iraq war. So this is one point, for example. The other point is to change Gaza Strip into Riviera and the International Commercial Center. And what about the people of Gaza Strip? And we have already the Arab Islamic plan. It is a plan. It's a very well-prepared plan for the reconstruction and the redevelopment of Gaza Strip. Why didn't we go to make it a Riviera and an international commercial center? So this is for example, yeah. And also the responsibility of the Palestinian Authority. And they asked, they have to inform themselves, and when they inform themselves faithfully, who will judge that they reform themselves faithfully? And if we ask to reform the Palestinian Authority faithfully, we have also to ask to reform the Israeli government faithfully, because the Israeli government has very, racist people, and they are against Palestinian, and they would like to live in peace in the Middle East. So this is, many items has to be negotiated.
Sure, and you raised some important points there. I'm curious to hear more about your views on Tony Blair's leadership of the Gaza Strip. I think that's a sort of an interim or temporary idea. But who would be the obvious candidate if it's not him? Who would you like to see ruling the Gaza Strip?
Well, Egypt represented since almost 1 year to be, a committee, Palestinian technocrat committee from leaders of the Gaza Strip, not related to any party or to any of the main organizations. And they will rule Gaza Strip under the auspices of the Palestinian Authority. Why? Because we have to look to the Gaza as an integral part of the Palestinian state. It is linked to the West Bank, and so it has to be under the auspices of the Palestinian Authority from one side, and the other side also to make the Palestinian Authority participate in the process of reconstruction and redevelopment, preparing for that when the Palestinian state will be completed, they will be aware and they will be there, and they will guarantee all the agreement reached and to be committed to this agreement.
I want to ask you about something that the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said. He said this, he said, peace is not a bird with a single wing. Putting the entire burden of peace on Hamas and the Palestinians is not fair, correct, or realistic. Do you think he has a point? Do you agree that the whole burden is being placed on Hamas? What do you think he's getting at here?
You know, maybe Hamas is not acceptable in all the countries of the area, but at the end, they are an important part of the Palestinian people. And I was one of the observers in the election. I mean, the parliamentary Palestinian elections in 2006, and then when Hamas get the majority. So they are still there. We may look at them as a political party, but we cannot say that they have to be excluded completely. Yes, excluded from, the control of Gaza Strip and to deliver their arms to Palestinian Arab Egyptian committee, and so to give some kind of guarantees to the Israeli side. And this is also is very, a very particular point. We are asking a militia a group which they have very modest arms to give a guarantee to one of the most, military powers in the Middle East, and it is considered one of the military arsenals in the area. So who gives the other the security and the guarantee for their security? So this is one of the points.
Okay, and just lastly, I mean, assuming that a deal is eventually struck there in Sharm el-Sheikh, what can the United States do to ensure that everybody adheres to it?
Well, I think is by the guarantees, like by Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey. They will be the acceptable guarantees for both parties, because the United States of America is a little bit on the, I'm not saying little bit, but too much on the side of Israel. And we have watched during the 2 years how they look to the Israeli war on Gaza and this devastating bombardment, and it is accused that they are practicing genocide, and the Prime Minister of Israel himself is wanted in front of the Criminal International Court, and so this ignored by the United States, and also they consider that the recognition of the Palestinian state is not the correct decision. So the most acceptable parts are the Turkey. Turkey is a member of the NATO. We have to remember that also. So they have many strategic cooperation with the United States of America. And at the same time, she is one of the main regional power.
Sure. Okay. Well, we appreciate you taking the time to speak to us, but we're out of time now, so we'll have to leave it there. Ambassador Rakha Hassan, thank you very much indeed for your time, sir. Well, staying in the Middle East, but turning to Syria, where parliamentary elections have been held for the first time since the ouster of President Bashar al-Assad. Well, after more than a decade of civil war, this marks a pivotal moment for the country. Well, the results are now in. Only 13% of the contested seats were won by female and minority candidates. Well, the election committee has acknowledged this as a shortcoming and expressed hope that President Ahmed al-Shara's upcoming appointments will help balance representation. Well, concerns over minority representation include Christians and Kurds. Kurdish-held areas in Syria's north and northeast, as well as the Druze majority province of Sueda, were excluded from voting due to security reasons. That's according to the authorities. However, they insist they are serious about future elections taking place there. Meanwhile, Syria's defense minister announced that a nationwide ceasefire has been declared yesterday after clashes between government forces and Kurdish fighters in Aleppo. Well, the latest tensions between Damascus and the Syrian Democratic Forces saw both sides blaming each other. The government accused the SDF of attacking checkpoints, whilst the SDF said the government forces were targeting civilians in Kurdish-held areas. Well, we can speak now to Salih Muslim, who is a member of the Presidential Council in the Democratic Union Party, who joins me from Kamishli, which is a town in northeastern Syria. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. This is just for the benefit of our viewers, but do correct me if I'm wrong. There are believed to be 2.5 million Kurdish people in Syria. They make up between 5 and 10% of the population there. Now, integration of Kurdish forces and Kurdish institutions is what Syria's new leaders want to see. What does Syria's Kurdish people want?
Well, hi to everybody and to all your audience. Well, for our integration, first of all, I would like to thank you and to giving me this opportunity to talk. For the integration, of course, I mean, we are looking for the integration with the Syria and, Syrian government, but of course there are measures because the Syrian revolution, when it started, they looked for the democracy, for the freedom and so on. But till now, what's in the regime, new regime, they are very different. They are away from the people, what they want, I mean. This is one. The second thing, we are not only the Kurdish people. I mean, since 2014 and 13, we have established a system here which is not for only the Kurdish. It's the Kurdish, Arab, Syrians, and all the diversities in this area are all of them in sharing in this system. So it's kind of democracy with women rights and so. So what we are looking for is to integrate this system as it is, I mean, with the freedom and so on, to the new Syrian regime. I mean, all Syria should be changed, I mean, to the freedom, democracy. But what we are saying, they are one color, only one color, just calling, and wants everybody to join them. So our discussions are with not only for the Kurdish rights or for the Kurdish people, it's for everybody living in this area, northeast of Syria, which is diversities for the belief-wise or even ethnically, they are very different, I mean.
Okay.
So what we...
Okay,
yeah, so it's a Kurdish issue.
All right. I mean, you've been quoted as saying, we will never accept a full return to centralized rule. So it sounds like partial integration is the goal, not full integration. So if not 100% integration, what sort of a percentage of integration, if you can put a number on it, are you looking for?
No, we are looking for complete integration. But there should be some changes, I mean. These changes, and this demand is not only for our people. You see, I mean, Syria, as I said, is a very different diversities in Alawites and Durzis and Christians and so on. So they are not accepting anybody. So we are trying to change, to modify, I mean, this regime in Damascus to accept this freedom and democracy, living together, to put all those people together to accept it. So it's not only partial integration also, it's not just like that. I mean, the agreement which was signed in the 10th of March, it's not only for our areas, for everybody. So we want them, I mean, even the regime, the government in Damascus should be changed to all the measures and specifications for democracy which is done in Europe and the Western countries. So this is our aim.
Okay, I mean, the Kurdish authorities and Kurdish forces control, as we've been saying, a large area of northern and northeastern Syria. I mean, Damascus has said that it wants to see Kurdish civil and military institutions integrated into the Syrian state. I mean, do you think that's going to happen eventually?
Yes, it can be happened. I mean, if they are free, and we said from the beginning, I mean, since we have signed this 10th of March agreement, we agreed. I mean, we just, established the committees and everything, and we are ready, and we have even map road for solution. But the other side, they don't accept it. I think just because of their mentality, or maybe by the effects of some neighbors, just like Turkey. Maybe neighbors, they don't like to have to see the democracy in Syria, especially in Syria. And we are not talking about the Kurdish people. I mean, you are repeating the Kurdish side. It's not only Kurdish. We are talking by the Kurdish, the Arabs, the Syrians, I mean, all the components in here. So it's not only the Kurdish issue, Kurdish matter.
Okay, but when it comes to Kurdish security forces, Syria's new leaders want one army. They say they want one army that protects all Syrians, and that includes Kurdish security forces. I mean, isn't that a good thing?
Yes, it's a good thing, I think, but I mean, maybe just they want us to be surrendered to them, which is not acceptable to us. What we are looking, I mean, because we have still dangers around us. They have attacks. We are still fighting against ISIS, and there are other groups. For example, you have seen what happened in Aleppo just 2 days ago. And even this regime, what happened in Alawite areas, in the coastal area, and in Sueda, you have seen what happened. So we cannot leave our people, our component, without protection. But if they guarantee that the security and the safety of our people, at that time we don't need the SDF. But till now, we are not persuaded that there are some forces can protect us and could fight against ISIS, and so we are not. We are not trusting them. So there is a problem for the trust.
I wanted to ask you about the clashes in Aleppo, deadly clashes earlier in the week in Syria's second city. A ceasefire has now been agreed, but what happened? What triggered that unrest, in your understanding?
Well, maybe, I don't know really. There was an agreement in the 10th of March, as he mentioned. And this is what complete agreement for all Syria. But partial agreement also they have done in the 1st of April, which is related to Aleppo and these Kurdish neighborhoods in Aleppo, Safieh and Sheikh Maqsoud. Since 2 months, there was, just surrounding, these areas and trying to attack. They are bothering them. They close the road and so on. So many things, happen. So the day before these clashes, they just surrounded all the areas. They didn't want anybody to come in, and even for logistics. So the people went out to just protest it, and they opened the fire on them with those, gases and so on. So they have to defend themselves. For your information, the clashes wasn't between the Democratic Syrian forces and them. There are only Assange, which is intelligent, like a police in the area, and the people, civilians in the area. SDF didn't involve in these clashes. The nearest point for SDF to Aleppo is about 50 kilometers away. So the people, they defended themselves. That happened, and now it stopped. It's okay, good. But still, there are some closing the roads, and the areas is still surrounded by them.
I wanted to ask you, sir, about the latest parliamentary elections to be held in Syria, because 21 of the seats were not filled because the elections were actually held in 3, I believe it was, Kurdish-controlled areas. Why did the voting not take place in those areas?
Well, I don't know. Maybe we have to ask Damascus what they have done it, but it's not kind of elections. I mean, election. When you say election, is a kind of action for the democracy, democratic state. But they don't even believe in democracy. What they say, the democracy is just against the Islam, so they don't believe on democracy. Because of that, what happened is just kind of selection instead of elections. Selection, they selected some people, and the president of Syria has agreed that the parliament should be 210 person members, and he's going to appoint 70 of them, and the other 140, they should be selected by the committees he established. And that's what happened. So we cannot say it's elections for the people. The people didn't share in it. It's just selections by the committees and by the president. That's all.
But I mean, clearly uniting Syria is a very difficult task. There's been years of bloodshed, years of brutal leadership under Bashar al-Assad and his father before him. And there are all these different groups within Syria. So the new leadership has a very difficult task of uniting the country and not taking part in the election. I mean, what's your desired outcome here? Why not come on board and help be part of this process of uniting Syria?
Well, I think it's wrong. I mean, if you want to do something right, you cannot do it with the wrong tools, you see. I mean, those people who came to Damascus, as you know, I mean, with their past, they were jihadists and locating in Idlib and so on, and now they came to Damascus. They have to change their mentality, their things. And because of that, I mean, from the beginning, they started to do one color. I mean, they just issued a declaration for the constitution, which is giving everything, I mean, all the rights to one person. But it's not acceptable, it's not democratic. And when they established a government, it was one color again. And now for the parliament, is one color again. What about the others? I mean, we are talking about the many other people. I mean, Arabs, Druze, Christians, Sunnis, Kurdish, Turkmens, everything. There are a lot of diversities, but they are taking by themselves only one color. It's just you should be jihadist or what you are looking for, acceptable by them. That's what they are doing. So the Syrian people, they don't accept such a thing. I mean, to be one color, all of Syria could not be a jihadist. And it's against the world also. So we are very, very doubtful about what they are trying to do.
I mean, the Americans are trying to help in Syria. They're trying to ensure that the new Syria, the next chapter for Syria, is a good one. The US envoy, Tom Barrack, has been in Damascus recently, taking part in dialogue. Dialogue is taking place between the president of Syria and the Kurdish leader, Mazloum Abdi. I mean, do you see these developments heading in a positive direction? Do you think that something good will come out of this dialogue and these efforts to carve out Syria's next chapter?
Well, that's what we hope, really, and we thank all of them. I mean, this international coalition and the Americans and even British and the France, they are trying to help to. What they are looking for is just to stabilize Syria. They want stability in Syria, but what we are looking for, I mean, our aim is to have justice and stability. And we believe if there is no justice, there wouldn't be the stability to do it. So stability with the justice is okay. Everybody wants that. I mean, the rights of the people, the freedoms, the women's rights, and so on, so to be modern. I mean, at least, I mean, moderate regime in Syria.
Just to wrap up this conversation, Mr. Muslim, what's your opinion about the general direction that Syria is heading in?
Well, I think we cannot we cannot return to the situation between 2011. I mean, maybe a strict centralized regime, and so we have to look for the decentralized system and should be agreed among the Syrians. I mean, all the countries just in Europe and everybody, I mean, is looking for decentralization. I mean, they're trying to give in the governance not only in one point, they want to distribute to the sides also. So, and this is also for Syria is valuable. It should be done. And this is what we are looking for. We know there are different things in the Middle East, mentalities and so on. So we need to struggle for it, to have democracy and freedom for the people. And we are trying to get the right way, the best way for the Syrian people. And of course, maybe in future there will be, but now it's not very near future. Maybe we need more time and more struggle to do it, to get these goals. Yes.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed. We really appreciate you speaking to us. Salih Muslim, member of the Presidential Council in the Democratic Union Party. Thank you very much indeed for your time, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much for you too. Thank you.
Now, our final story for today. Gold has surged past $4,000 an ounce, marking an unprecedented milestone. Well, investors have rushed to the precious metal as a safe haven from growing global economic uncertainty and on the expectation that US interest rate cuts could be on the horizon. Well, let's find out more now. We can speak to Dr. Jihad Al-Haqqaim, who is an economist and wealth management consultant who joins us now from Beirut. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. What's your opinion? Why has gold surged so rapidly these last few months?
Thank you for hosting me. Actually, you have different reasons, but the main theme is the dollar debasement and currency debasement. This is the big headline. Of course, you can add to that several factors, the geopolitical factors, the recklessness when it comes to managing the fiscal policies, the debt to GDP, the problem with actually the monetary policies around the globe. You have lots of central banks are buying heavily gold around the globe. So all these are contributing to the surge in gold prices.
Okay, so US fiscal policy, geopolitics playing a part. Did you see this coming? Did you think this was predictable, this rise in the price of gold?
Whenever we are in a certain upward trend, we know that it's going to go up until a further notice. So I expected first that we're going to see double the prices or double the peak that we had, let's say, 14 years ago when gold reached 1,937, but crossing 4,000, it's something. But we have to see if we're going to see a monthly closing above 4,000 or actually there will be a certain correction. So lots of questions are here, but as long as gold prices are up, so technically speaking, we have to follow the trend.
And what does it tell us about what's around the corner? Are there any sort of historical patterns when we've seen a spike in the price of gold? Has that been an indicator of, for example, a looming recession or an economic downturn, or are there no particular patterns that we can follow?
There is no consistency when it comes to that. And as you know, that correlation is not causality. So, of course, we look at correlation in general to see if we can actually forecast something. But as you know, for academic people, correlation does not imply causality. And if we want to look at, historically speaking, there is no consistency when it comes to if gold prices are increasing, it means we are in a certain recession or we forecast a certain recession. So we have mixed signals when it comes to that.
Why is gold such a powerful safe haven? I mean, it has been for thousands of years. What's the appeal?
Actually, because it's rare, unlike silver. If you look at silver, because lots of people, they do the silver-gold trade. So silver today at $49, it's the price that it reached in April 2011. So the appeal is still for gold because it's rare, and actually it used to be the medium of exchange, because you know that we started by bimetallism, and the coins that we used to exchange, it used to be gold and silver. That's why gold is still here, and the appetite is for central banks is to buy more gold than silver when it comes to hedging, when it comes to whenever you have uncertainty. So hedging not just against inflation, but as well against any uncertainty. And as you know, nowadays, the fiat currencies, there is a debasement. As I told you, this is the big headline. And central banks are buying heavily gold, not just China, India, Turkey, but around the globe. And it's still what we call safe haven, and you know, it's a cultural factor. So, you know, it's very difficult to change culture. And as you know, culture is a strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, as we know. So it's a cultural aspect as well behind it. So it's not just a speculation, but you have cultural aspect that is here, why we buy gold.
Now, you're an expert on wealth management. In your opinion, what percentage of a diversified portfolio should be allocated to gold?
Between 8%, 5 to 10%. 8 is going to be ideal.
Okay, that's a good indicator. What about other safe havens like crypto? Would you say that Bitcoin, for example, is the modern day safe haven? Do you see it as competition for gold in that category?
Actually, Bitcoin is a digital asset, but it's not a safe haven. So if you want to go for Bitcoin, it means you are going for risky assets. And now we have two, let's say, camps. One, on one hand, you have people who want to be risk averse. They want to buy gold. They want to go for safe haven. And you have people nowadays chasing equity that are AI driven. And they are betting that there will be a certain boom in the economy. So you have people who want to run the risk. They want to buy cryptos, Bitcoin in particular, and AI-driven equity. And you have others who want to be more risk-averse, and they want to buy gold, which is the safe haven.
And what would be your thoughts if someone were to say that, you know, we've hit the 4,000 per ounce mark? I mean, could the 5,000 an ounce mark be on the horizon?
Actually, technically speaking, it's all-time new high. We never know. It's going to depend on the monthly closing. If it's going to close, now it is at 4,050. If we're going to see a closing above 4,000, it means we actually were able to cross the 4,000 psychological level. And if we get a confirmation at the end of the month, so it means it's going to continue up. But until when, we don't know. But if it's a super cycle for gold, so we never know where it's going to reach.
Okay, so people who are watching are thinking, oh, maybe I should be buying some gold now. Would you say they've perhaps missed the boat now that we're already in this you know, high price market? Is it a buyer's market for gold?
There is always the FOMO effect, or the fear of missing out, but the golden rule is you have to diversify or you die. So it means you have to always be reasonable, and you should diversify your portfolio depending on your risk appetite, your age, your goals, and your financial literacy. So this is always actually a matter of you have to tailor it according to every investor. So if someone is 80, is different than someone who's 20. So if you're 20, you have there is a certain rule that we say you take 100 minus your age, and this is how much you should put in equity. And whenever we're talking equity, it should be diversified around the globe, not just in one country and not just in one currency. So if you're 80, you're going to have less equity than someone who is 20. So you do 100 minus the age. This is one of the ways how to manage a certain portfolio.
Okay. And I mean, clearly we're speaking to you from the Middle East and you're in Lebanon. I mean, is there any aspect of, does gold hold more appeal in this region, would you say, than in other regions of the world? Anything particular about this particular region?
Of course, because Lebanon is a pure cash economy and people are saving their money and they're purchasing gold. So you can see the vast majority of Lebanese, you might see 100% of their portfolio is in gold because they don't have access to international markets because the banking system completely collapsed. There is no trust in the banking system, and in the cash economy, instead of saving your money in dollars and actually being, there is a risk of inflation. And since the Lebanese currency lost its role, so it's no longer a currency because it's no longer a store of value and it's no longer a medium of exchange. We are in a dollarized economy, but people, they prefer to save their money in gold. So there is a big appetite. People buy gold, and you can see people queuing to buy just different ounces, and their monthly saving, they prefer to purchase gold with what they save.
And what about in Saudi Arabia? Do you see a strong appetite for gold there as well?
Depends. In Saudi Arabia, you have more people who have accessibility to international markets, so they are diversifying their portfolio in a more scientific manner because they have more options. The banking system functions very well. You have there as well financial market. You have a stock market. And they are diversifying their portfolio in a more reasonable manner. Let's call it this way.
Okay, and just to wrap up the conversation, what's your long-term outlook for gold? Do you think it will remain a reliable anchor for investors in this increasingly unpredictable world?
Of course, for those who are risk averse, they're going to purchase gold more and more. But actually, the surge in prices is driven for me mainly by central bank and not by speculators or individual demand. Of course, gold is gonna stay there. It's gonna always stay. It's gonna always be important, but you have to be reasonable. Gold is not really an investment, but a hedge against inflation. And the investment normally it's gonna be more in equity market, but we always advise people to be reasonable and to diversify their portfolio in a very scientific manner. Gold is going to be part of the portfolio in all cases.
Okay, well, we really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Dr. Jihad Al-Hokaim, economist and wealth management consultant. Thank you for your time, sir. That is all we have time for on Global News today. Thank you very much indeed for watching. Be sure to join us again tomorrow for more exclusive interviews. Until then, bye-bye.